Hello, my name is Mark from jazzguitarlessons.net, and in today's lesson we'll be covering the essentials of bebop scales for jazz guitar. As a result, your playing will be enhanced by more jazz-like phrasing using several natural and flowing fingering patterns. Why bebop scales? Well, at some point in their development, jazz improvisers usually get tired of fitting the right scales over chords, right? Like Dorian, Mixolydian, and major scales, and you long for a more chromatic approach to soloing. As an analogy, playing the right scales remind me of a child coloring on paper. Do not exceed the lines. But once we can do it, once there's no more challenge, it's playing boring, right? So we need some sort of new puzzle or new concept to keep things interesting. But how do we add more notes other than the plain inside diatonic ones? Where should we start? Fortunately, with bebop scales, the right notes become the starting point of our chromatic adventure. So we'll be adding outside notes to familiar scales. So you most likely grasp 95% of this concept already. We simply have to change our perspective slightly. First, what is the so-called bebop scale? There's an older video on YouTube titled The Bebop Scale Demystified, in which I explain the concept. In a few words, the main idea behind the bebop scales is adding one note to a 7-note scale to make it fit the bar of 4/4. Obviously, a scale that has 8 notes is better suited for a 4/4 time signature than a scale that has only 7 notes. Technically, you could be adding a passing tone randomly anywhere within a scale you already know. But in reality, we add a bebop passing tone in a scale by making the important notes, the chord tones, fall on strong beats. Okay, so enough for the talking, let's go to the playing. Grab your guitar now, because today you'll learn 4 important bebop scales with their most useful fingerings on the instrument, and you can see the PDF, so let's get going. First, let's look at a major bebop scale. The major bebop scale has a passing tone in between the 5th and 6th degree of the scale. And here it is played in C major, so C major bebop scale in 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again. Be careful with the fingering here, though. The first 3 notes of the scales of this scale are played with the fingers 1, 2, and 4. And now the fingers 1, 3, and 4. The reason for this is it's much easier to stretch between the index and the middle finger rather than stretching here with the pinky, right? Note that we just had a 1-octave version of the scale. We could have the 2-octave version like this. Or we can even start with the C root on the 6th string here instead of the 5th. Those possibilities are all noted in the PDF. Closely related to the major bebop, we have the minor bebop scale. This is very straightforward because all we have to do is really lower the 3rd note of the scale. So instead of C, D, and E, it's going to become C, D, and E flat. Let's play it like this on 1 octave. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again. Be careful once again with the fingerings. This one is played with the fingers 1, 2, and 3 to start the scale. And now let's discuss some theory. Before going any further, we need a little bit of musical theory. The last 2 bebop scales in this video are going to be the Dorian and the Mixolydian bebop scales. Recall that a 2-5-1 progression in the key of C major is D minor 7 to G7 to C major 7. Also recall that the scale of choice for this D minor 7 is the D Dorian scale containing the notes D, E, F, G, A, B, and C, and that the scale of choice for G7 is the G Mixolydian containing the notes G, A, B, C, D, E, and F. Note that both these modes, scales, are still only using notes from the C major scale, so just the white keys on the piano, basically. If none of this is familiar to you, please refer to the theory section on jazzguitarlessons.net. And now let's add a bebop passing tone to both the Dorian and Mixolydian scales. So here's the Dorian bebop scale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again. This one really is the easiest when we start with the pinky of the fretting hand to start the scale. Also see the PDF for extra materials. And lastly, let's explore the Mixolydian bebop scale. This scale applies to dominant chords, obviously, and it's usually called just the bebop scale, or an old school jazz player will tell you bebop scale when referring to the Mixolydian mode with a bebop passing tone. Let's play this together. 1, 2, 3, 4. again. Fingerings for the Mixolydian bebop scale can become really tricky when playing it on more than one octave, on 2 octaves like here. My personal rule of thumb is start with the pinky, or start with the third finger, depending, and shift using the second finger on scale degrees 3 and 4. Of course, you can always see the PDF for full fingerings and tabs of this. The question of the day, of course, now we saw 4 bebop scales, always, can we use this bebop scale concept on other scales and modes? Yes, absolutely sure you can, but we'll stop here for today. Check out the video titled Bebop Modes on the jazzguitarlessons.net YouTube channel. And now for a quick note on the fingerings. Did you notice that all of which we have covered so far in this video does not fit a regular scale position on the guitar? This is not an accident, right? The fingerings that suit bebop scale best are so-called diagonal fingerings. It's a combination of playing across the strings and across the fretboard at the same time. So from personal experience, diagonal fingerings are great for genuine jazz-like phrasing on the guitar, right? Notice that the aim of using such diagonal patterns is to get identical fingerings on subsequent octaves. The fingers to ears relationship is strengthened. You can play the same musical phrase an octave higher by having the same fretting hand's finger produce the same sound. Right? This is what's going to happen. So it's like piano. On the piano, the fingerings repeat themselves on many octaves. How great is that? If you can find a way to fit it on the guitar, that's great. And the last note about the fingerings, the chromatic notes are grouped on the same string. So as I just played a part of the D minor bebop, D dorian minor bebop, so we group the chromatic notes within the same string. It's just a personal preference, right? I don't like to have to change string in the middle of a lick. So the notes, these 4 notes were together, or the notes of the G7 bebop here were all on the same string. Whatever works for you is fine, but this is very practical for me. In conclusion, let me answer some of your questions, and that before they even arise. The typical question is always, where do I apply bebop scales? And my answer is always, almost always, don't. I mean, sure, obviously you can use a C major bebop on a C major chord and a D dorian bebop on a D minor 7 and so on. But the aim of this whole endeavor is to have you play more chromatically, to have more chromaticism into your playing. Remember, this is not to learn to connect the dots once again and plug in the right scales onto the right chords. So I strongly believe that you should build a deep technical proficiency with those exercises before attempting to consciously apply them on chord progression while improvising. You need to develop at least some degree of muscle memory before jumping on applications. Plus, it's a fact that forcing cerebral ideas into your music is simply bad news. I mean, when you're soloing, the left part of the brain should stay put and not attempt to plug in some intellectual concepts into your lines. In brief, just learn the materials and have faith that these ideas will show up into your playing when your fingers and ears are ready for it. You just have to believe that it's going to happen, and you have to believe me to some extent. So practicing bebop scales is like lifting weights and running a treadmill when you want to get better at baseball, football, or hockey. Hey, I'm Canadian. And the training is not the sport itself, it's only the preparation to the sport. So rehearsing your bebop scale exercises will prepare you to play nice jazz lines when you are under fire, while you are improvising for real. That is, when there's no more time to think anymore. So once again, my advice is go and lift the weights, run that treadmill, then simply let your unconscious mind do the job. It's much easier this way, and it's really much more fun. For more on that topic, I highly recommend podcast number 21 on jazzguitarlessons.net. And that's it for today. So I'm Mark from jazzguitarlessons.net. Improve your jazz guitar playing with a real teacher, and I'll see you in the next video lesson. Take care.